Hey, Crow, how's it going?
Good.
I'm not gonna lie, man. I'm more than excited right now to be talking to you, man. So thanks for joining, man.
No problem.
Yeah, so I got Jesse over here to my right, and then I got another guy that just joined the podcast a couple weeks ago named Johnny. He'll be joining us today.
Hello, another guy. Hello, Jesse. Hello, Johnny.
What's
hey,
up,
Crow.
man?
Well, cool, man. Yeah, so welcome to Talk Junkies. Thanks for being a part of our podcast. We got a pretty good podcast today, so it's going to be some fun stuff.
Cool. How long are we going today?
I think an hour. If you can spare an hour of your time, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no problem. I've got another recording, but it's later this afternoon.
Cool. Well, we're here in Missouri, man, and the weather is quite cold. So it's been pretty brutal winter for us. How's it out your way?
Well, we've had some real cold, but very little snow. There's a little bit of flurrying going on right now, but I don't think we've had snow stick more than a day or two. It's been followed by rain every time. I'm sure it'll be part of the global warming nonsense. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I agree. We're pretty lucky for the past 3 years with no snow, but this year we got quite a bit. So we like it. The kids like it and all that good stuff. So
yeah, we had it in spades last year.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself, man. We have a very small amount of listeners. We're up to 90 subscribers, but hey, man, we're growing. It's happening very slowly, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
I think most people are aware of me from my early work on YouTube under Crrow777 on YouTube. From my telescope work, that's probably how most people know me. But we've been running a podcast, Crrow777 Radio, for, I don't know, what's getting to be close to 3 years maybe. Which has really taken off. And my co-host Jason just got a P1000, so he's going to begin filming. I had to get surgeries, so hopefully I'll be able to film through the scope again when it warms up. I'm very interested on doing some work on the sun. I think the sun's going to be where it's at right now.
Very cool. Yeah, I have a P900, so I mean, I was literally last year I bought it, and then they came out with the P1000, so I was a little upset about that, but I might have to invest into that. No, a
lot of people are doing, the thing about the P900 is it's really kind of the first camera which allows you not to have a small scope. You can pretty much full frame the moon. And I think most people are pretty happy with it. Jason just got the 1000, and he seems to be happy with it, but it's a much more inexpensive way for people to look at the moon without having to invest in a telescope. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I would definitely advise getting a tripod or something like that, not try to do it handheld. But
yeah, you got to have it. When you're using magnification, you can't do it by hand.
Oh, no, you'd be all over the place. I'd be filming parts of the stars and stuff and not even have the moon in frame.
Right. If you film anything and it's jiggly, you might as well not have filmed it.
Yeah. Cool, man. So I was listening to one of your podcasts a couple weeks ago, and you were just talking about how censored YouTube is censoring you. So can you tell us a little bit about how that's working for you?
Oh, it's brutal. They're I don't even know what to call them. They're overlords. They want to control the conversations. They don't want any mainstream narrative challenged. They're at this point, well, they deleted my Facebook account in the fall of 2017. We'd gone through a year of censorship before that. Then in this run, after we cleared the fall of 2018 in December, they announced they were going to do a sub-scrub of all things. And that was going to happen on the 13th and 14th of December. It hit me on the 12th. And from that point forward, I would estimate now I'm carrying about a third of the traffic I used to. It's wholesale censorship. And to top it off, one of the things they're doing now is embedding a Encyclopedia Britannica entry. Like if you challenge the moon landings, they put up their ridiculous Encyclopedia Britannica. They want to stifle any discovery, and they want to keep everyone locked in old ideas. And at this point, I'm actually preparing to have no YouTube at all because I'm not bowing to this crap. That's for sure.
So you think it's, and I've never thought about it this way before, but you think it's based on like the actual content and them trying to censor specific information or ideas, not so much let's not recommend things that aren't making ad revenue let's only do the things that the kids are watching these days that we want the 15-year-olds on YouTube watching because they're glued to the screen and we get a lot of ad revenue and entertainment value out of that and whatnot. You think it's actually more of just a direct, like, info?
I don't think it has anything to do with revenue. For my channel, they've cut the revenue to a third of what it was. And since they're taking the lion's share of the revenue, unless they're stealing everything somehow, they've cut basically what they're taking down to a third as well. What this is about is, Jason and I have done shows to basically show that there are two major corporations in the world that own everything that matters. And Google and all the online assets fall into this. People think cryptocurrency is a good idea, but I got news for them. It's the same overarching control systems that are pushing all this crap. They want everything to go online because they can rule it with an iron fist because they own the infrastructure. Basically, Google owns, what, if someone asked you what percentage of the internet does Google control, I don't know what your answer would be, but it's significant. Check this out. In the fall of 2017, Jason and I covered the bogus Mandalay Bay shooting because so many people were still being fooled. That was the last episode we put up before they deleted us. We were deleted for about 3 weeks, and we think that so many people complained that they brought it back. But here's the deal. Before they deleted my channel, if you took Crrow777 and put it in a search engine, you got millions of returns. The day that they put my channel back, if you put Crrow777 in a search engine, you got 6,000 returns. All this time later, you get, depending where you are in the world, maybe 70, 80, 90,000 returns on Crrow777. That's down from like 16, 17, sometimes 20 million returns. To this day, if you put the lunar wave, which I discovered, into a search engine, you'll probably clear 1 million returns. But if you put my name with the lunar wave, it goes down under 20,000.
That's insane, because that's direct censorship based on, I wouldn't think it would, no, seriously, I wouldn't think it would work that way. Like, I mean, you put lunar wave in and you get 1 million results or whatever. Adding something to that, adding Crrow777 to that, 777 to that would be, you would think there'd be more results, 1.3 million now.
Well, it used to be that way, and this is what happened. So over all the years before they deleted my channel, people had embedded my content, Lord knows how many times. That's why you get so many returns. When they deleted my channel, and they did delete it, it was frickin' gone. All those links became dead links. So I don't know if you guys understand how a DNS server works, like a domain name server. Basically, it's an address for things. And so I think what happened, and I've got a degree in internet technology, is so all these links go dead. So different ISPs deal with it in different ways, but basically dead links get scrubbed out. And not only that, people who posted the content might notice that there's a dead link and remove it. So they basically put a shadow ban of some sort on my name. Then all that content was scrubbed, but the effect of it was to scrub servers worldwide. Whether they actually scrubbed the content or just the search returns is hard to know. For all you know, Google said if there's a page and it's got a bunch of dead links, we won't do a search return for that page anymore. Hard to know exactly what happened. But in essence, when they nail your YouTube account, they're taking that content and the author assigned to that content, and they're scrubbing them from the system.
Yeah, I don't know how much longer YouTube, obviously they're going to survive, but for people like us, I don't see how much longer they're going to survive this community, because there's only so much you can do at that point. I mean, it's not about the money for me. It's about getting the message out there, but still, I'd like to have an audience, and it's even tough for us. Like I said, we're at 90 subscribers and it's been a year now. Actually, today's our year anniversary for starting our podcast. So it's frustrating.
Well, here's the thing. When I started, someone trying to start now is going to have a very tough time unless they want a channel about hula hoops and people falling down and getting kicked in the nuts.
Or video games,
that's
right?
all YouTube approved. If you want to talk about the fact that Sandy Hook is nonsense, if you want to talk about the fact that Mandalay Bay is nonsense, that global warming is nonsense, that NASA has never said a true thing in its existence, then you're going to have problems because they are defending these overarching lies that have run our world for so long. That's basically what this is about. You got to realize in 2006, when YouTube was bought, and I forget the exact numbers, I think it was like $1.6 billion or something. At the time, it was one of the largest purchases that had ever gone down for anything to do with anything online. But what people don't understand is the dudes that invented YouTube, or that are cited as having invented YouTube, came from, I forget, was it eBay or PayPal? It was one of those two things.
I think it was PayPal. One of them was like the founder of PayPal or something like that, I want to say.
So you can already see the complicit nature of what's gone on. But think about this. To this day, if I want to serve private video, I can't afford it. If I take 3 of my HD YouTube videos that run an hour and I serve them, it costs me $30-$40 a month, basically. So this is what they've done. But so they go in and buy this new video serving platform that was made by insiders, and they're not making money at this point, and they're saying to the entire world, give us all your video. We don't give a damn. Well, you had to do certain things to be able to run longer than 15-minute videos. Point is, the whole world's feeding all this video. You know how much that server storage and serving and bandwidth cost? And so they run this way for a number of years, not really turning a profit. And then finally the ad revenue starts to catch up, and they start to make huge sums of money. Point is they knew what this was going to be. They knew how important it is, and they have maintained a vice-like grip on video serving. Because to this day, if I want to serve video, I can't afford to do it. And yet they can serve video for the whole world. And there is the insider baseball, and there is the intent to control messaging.
I got it. And that was great, by the way. And that's a very scary future if you're talking about big corporations basically being the gatekeeper for information on the internet and all.
They already are. And they already are. Yeah.
And that's a scary future. And I hope enough people become aware of that to where, that can be combated in some kind of way.
There's things going on in our world. Like last episode we just did had to do with the idea of liability. Here's the problem. Everything you've ever seen in our country about free speech has to do with the government. And so there's the long game complicit nature of our supposed government. If you're a government and you're going to make these rules, laws, rights, Bill of Rights, whatever the hell you're going to codify, and you're truly concerned with free speech and expression, you'll be saying things like, nobody can abridge your free speech. What actually got said, what actually got codified, was the government cannot abridge your free speech. And that's like 99% of all the supposed laws people think they understand is basically saying the government can't do it. So it's not really governments that are doing it. It's massive corporations. But here's the bitch of it. The government is backing, supporting, and even pushing, like Facebook in some cases, to censor. So when we start to think about how would you go about changing this, at some point, it probably has to stay the inside of a courtroom. That's more of the problem that we face these days because nobody really understands what kind of law is getting practiced. It's basically some kind of admiralty law, merchant law, lex mercatoria. We've done 5 episodes on this type of law. So maybe we'll see somebody bring liability or something against these major corporations. It's hard to know. But until then, what they are doing is abridging worldwide free speech, protecting the lies that are Sandy Hook, 9/11, or any number of things I could just rattle off the top of my head, protecting fraud agencies like NASA who exist to ensure nobody has any idea about what's over their head. And for my money, this was known in advance, and everything that's gone on was playing the long game to put them in a position to control the narrative online, which is in fact the way we're living now.
Now, you just mentioned a bunch of institutions right there that possibly could be corrupt in some way. What, in your opinion, is the most corrupt or in need of fixing institutions, like, let's just say, in America?
The central bank. The central bank is everything. The central bank is the root of everything. When you hear people say money is the root of all evil, they're not kidding. But unfortunately, we don't even have money, do we? We have fiat currency. It's paper that has zero value. It's an IOU. So if I buy something from you, I hand you an IOU that can never be cashed in for value, for specie. what used to be called specie, which is basically gold or silver. Richard M. Nixon took us off the gold standard back in the 70s. He's also the guy who privatized healthcare. When I was young, hospitals existed for the people. As soon as he privatized it, they became corporate monsters that are all about the profit. Same thing going on there as YouTube or Google taking over the internet. He allowed Kaiser Permanente to privatize healthcare for the first time, and now look where we are. But to get back to the point, the central bank is the root of all evil in this system. It's the money names, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, these type of places. And so few people even bother to understand the Federal Reserve is not federal. It's owned by private families. And when they make money, they tap a keyboard. I'm not even kidding here. They make it up out of thin air. It has no value because it can never be traded back for gold or silver. It's just an IOU. It's called fiat currency. And to make things worse, whenever they invent new money, they'll give it to like the government, but it's given at interest. So from the moment that new worthless money hits our system, it's at interest and it's created debt. So the next time you turn on your nonsense news, which is, there is no news in our world anymore unless it's a private citizen, and you hear them squawking about the debt, the national debt, just laugh. Because this system does not exist without debt. And the fact is that next year, more debt will need to be accrued or the whole system would crash. It's all a shell game. It is all a shell game. And to make matters worse, people can go online and look up a speech that was given in 1924 in this country. It was given to the bankers of the United States. The man who gave the speech was the governor of the Central Bank of England, which was the model bank for our central bank. His name was either Norman Montague or Montague Norman, I forget which. And basically what he tells the bankers in this country in 24, and anyone can look up the speech, is, hey man, we have this political system in place in the United States, you know, red and blue, Democrats, Republicans. So now we can use it to our benefit. It was put in place so that we can get people to argue endlessly about things of no importance. Tells you flat out what the political system in this country is about. There's no portion of what people think the government is, the banking, any of it, that is not insider fraud baseball designed by seemingly the oldest, most powerful families in the world to take over everything. And that's where we're headed right now, unless people wake up and push back.
I remember the first time I ever heard about that was actually, there's a guy named Joseph Peter, I believe, who did the Zeitgeist movie. I don't know if you've ever heard about that or not.
I have heard of Zeitgeist.
And then he actually talked about the central banking system in the second one, which I believe was called Zeitgeist Addendum, which I think I was 16 or 17 at the time, which is when I first heard about that. And it actually blew my mind. Like, why aren't they teaching this in school? Like, that should be fundamental, you know, whenever you're...
Yeah, because schools are controlled in the same way. Yeah, all the textbooks for schools in this country come out of one place in Texas. There's a couple places that decide what goes into a textbook, and it's basically no damn different than what YouTube is doing right now. So I put up a clip proving that the Apollo moon landings never happened. What they do is they demonetize the clip. They may remove it. They certainly won't recommend it. They may shadow ban it so that it looks like the numbers are growing, but actually nobody's seeing it. And on top of that, they're going to embed their nonsensical Encyclopedia Britannica thing right in your video that says, well, this all really happened, and here's how it happened, and here's what you need to believe. You think it's any different, then you need to do some catching up, because the school system here is designed to do one thing. It indoctrinates people into understanding how to work within the system, but it teaches them zero about the system.
I think that's something that we can literally, everybody in this room and yourself obviously all agree on. We've talked about education and everything of that nature here before, and I think we're all in agreement there that school is
indoctrination.
Yeah, it's kind of a joke as to what you're learning.
Well, I have one kid and one on the way, and it's scary. I mean, my oldest is only a year and a half, so I'm kind of torn on what to even do, you know, in the next...
Teach your own children.
Yeah.
Even if they go to school. Right now, in the paper the other day here in Rhode Island, there's a damn article saying, cursive writing actually might come back. Do you know that children right now have not been taught cursive writing for I don't even know how long. So when they're faced with all the old historical documents in our world that are all written in cursive, they can't read it. And so now they're saying, oh, well, maybe cursive writing will start coming. It's beyond. They're creating a slave class, which makes up 90-something% of our world, of people who think they've got an education, but what they got was an indoctrination. But that doesn't prevent any human being from tapping into their adult higher mind and teaching themselves what they need to know, because once you're not a child anymore, you can do that. But all these young children coming now, man, if I was a parent, whether they went to school or not, they'd be getting an education at home for sure.
And honestly, that's probably how it should be, is that children should probably be, morally guided and, educated from their parents more so than schools anyway. That's probably just how it always should have been, but
used to be that way.
Yeah.
Used to be, but Jason and I have done an endless number of podcasts. Not endless. We're up to almost 150, I guess, 2-hour shows. And we've shown that this country was taken apart verbatim, starting in the 60s. Tavistock, social engineers, all the music that you think was so great was social engineering. The folk movement that turned into the rock and roll movement was all insiders. Each of the people who started that, and I don't give a damn what band you point at, whether you're going to look at the Doors or Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, or any of those bands that kick-started the electrified rock movement out of the folk movement, all of them had parents that were either in CIA, high-ranking military. It was all insider baseball, and it was all done to take apart the family unit. It was all done to demoralize, to remove the morals of this country, and it worked. It's maybe one of the most effective attacks that I can ever cite. They got everyone to get on drugs. They normalized drugs. They spun out a generation on LSD and any number of things. They started the free love movement. And so now, when you go back and look at the historical record through Hollywood's eyes, you can see that in the 50s and early 60s, Leave It to Beaver's mom and dad couldn't even sleep in the same damn bed. That didn't happen till the Brady Bunch. There was the moral difference. By the time we get up to the 60s, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young is telling everyone, well, if you can't be with the one you love, just love the one you're with. And by the way, do some LSD while you're doing it. And that LSD was manufactured in the damn universities. So all these parents and grandparents putting their young kids into school were actually throwing them into the very place that was creating the drug culture and the counterculture movement, which was all social engineering thanks to Tavistock.
So you're saying that was very heavily guided, because I believe that over time morality does just naturally change and evolve along with culture as well. But you're saying it's even going to the point to where it was orchestrated. That
let me put it to you this way: when the free love movement kicked off, how convenient is it that the birth control pill was released at the same time? Same people, same control mechanism, all geared to do a thing, to remove any moral taboo about sexual ingress in our society, to remove any taboo about being drugged out, to remove any taboo of young people having no respect for their parents, because most of the 60s, that's what it was about, was that the young people couldn't trust anyone over 30. And look at the Vietnam War and all these things. Screw all you people. You're ruining the world. When in fact, what happened was a generation got drugged out of their damn minds. The moral values in this country were completely decimated. And then they all grew up from being very liberal hippies and became very conservative, most of them. And so then they fell into the damn political nonsense construct that I just referenced earlier with a speech from the guy of a central bank in England telling you that basically if you're foolish enough to consider yourself a Republican or a Democrat, what in essence you've done is taking a hugely complex thing called a human being and then stuffed them in a damn little box called Democrat or Republican, which, by the way, are not even your ideas. They're someone else's ideas. So, yeah, man, you can show it all, and you can show it all day long.
That's literally what we talked about on our last podcast. We brought up the difference between, it was either our last one or one before that. I can't recall now, but
It was in the past like 3 weeks.
Yeah, sure. the bipartisan lines and how people, like, as soon as you put someone under a label, everybody perceives them differently that way. Instead of us looking at each other as individuals with different ideas and views, and like, as far as the whole Democrat and Republican thing goes, you're instantly, as soon as someone is a Democrat or a Republican, people from the opposite end who identify themselves, there's automatically a clash there instead of learning things from each other.
By design.
Yeah, and
so what do you think the end goal is right there, Crow?
Total control.
Right.
It's a very simple thing. Total control. Basically, what's going on in our world right now is we're seeing the rise of what I'll call the technocracy. We've never seen anything like it. The control that they'll bring to bear will be overwhelming because they have been collecting data for quite a while now. And that data gives them a time machine. Very few people understand that algorithms were written early in the 1900s that told them how to read the 21st century like a book. The difference is that back then they didn't have the data to apply it to. Now the data stream is infinite. Every day so much data is collected you couldn't calculate it if you had to. And by the way, more is on the way. And it does things, and people refuse to believe this, but it's absolutely true. I know what I'm talking about here. It does things like any person that they've collected enough data on, they can tell them when they will die, to the hour, day, place, cause, and what group of human beings that places them in. When The Winter Soldier was put out recently, one of the Marvel movies, they made fun of this. They told everyone truthfully that the 21st century is an open book. And they said, well, what's that mean? Well, it means we got these new machines that can target everyone based on their data. We can kill 1 million people at a time. And they're all, well, why would you do that? There can't be 1 million people that are enemies out there. He's all, no, you don't understand. The data also tells us that this person we're looking at today is no problem at all. But it proves that in 20 years, he probably will be. That's what data collection has done. And every bit of data is being collected. And that sets aside how social engineering works. Variety is the enemy of social engineering. And we see it everywhere. The Democrat-Republican is a perfect example. If you can get some foolish individual to join one of these groups, you've just removed variety. Now they believe what all the other Democrats in this group believe. Now they believe what everyone else in the Republican Party believes. And so it's very easy to go in there and work out ways to modify that group, to socially engineer that group. But you can even see it in the real world. When I was young, when Ford put out a Mustang, what did Chevy do? Well, they put out a Camaro, right? And there were all these colors and variety and all this stuff going on because they were truly at that point in competition. And then when they put out the Camaro, Dodge was going to put out a Challenger and a Charger. There will even be special colors like Challenger purple. Now go out and look at the streets. Not very many colors on cars anymore. And if you take something like the class of vehicle that a Hyundai Santa Fe would be, and then look at what Chevy's put out in the same class, look out what they all look the same. The variety has been completely removed. And this is about social engineering. And that sets aside the fact you were mentioning earlier, how many people out there listening understand that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are from the same royal Scottish bloodline? Didn't even frickin' matter which one of them took office. And we can historically go back to show that whether they were Democrats or Republican, they did the same thing. Jimmy Carter was the first guy in 1973 to stack the federal government with trilateral commission members. And trilateral commission members are, in fact, the spear point pushing the technocracy. What the technocracy seeks to do is make them gods. But they've got a problem. The natural world, from our point of view, is perfect. When something needs to happen in nature, there's no lie in it. If it needs to happen, it will happen. Not only will it happen, it'll happen when it needs to happen. They cannot be gods of that system. So what they are doing is creating an artificial world with technology. When that has gone to every facet of our lives, then they can step in and be gods of an artificial system called technology, run by a technocracy, which is basically a fancy way of saying a dictatorship based on an iron grip provided by technology. All those things. And it never ends because in some ways we're all just as damn guilty as the people we're screaming at. Maybe not quite, but we ain't scot-free. when you were told in high school what seat's a president. Do any one of you guys know what seat's a president?
What do you mean by that?
So what is the actual nuts and bolts mechanism that puts a president in the president's seat?
The Electoral College.
There it is. You were told that in high school. The voting that goes on has no meaning, and people refuse to believe it, but you were told in high school. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump, one of many examples I could cite, was seated against the popular vote. Well, the popular vote is all the people voting saying we want this other person. The Electoral College sat him anyhow, which is proof. Another guy, Garfield. As a matter of fact, there's one guy, what's his name? His descendants are those geniuses from Pawn Stars. I kid you not. Harrison is the forefather of these jokers running Pawn Stars, those brilliant individuals. And he was sat against the popular vote, as were a number of them. In other words, every 4 years, this country walks out into the street drooling, literally drooling, to go vote. And it has no impact one way or the other who gets seated as president, because the Electoral College does that. And that is set up with insider baseball. And that is from the beginning or founding of this country. And by the way, if anyone doubts what I'm saying, you guys know who the first president of this country was?
George Washington?
Nope. There were a crap load before George. Look it up.
I didn't know that.
You do now.
I'm gonna have to do some research on that. That sounds very interesting. I love American history.
You guys have a podcast, so the voice that you offer can matter here. Because when you start to point out things like this, people start to say, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't be swallowing everything I was told in school.
Have you thought about maybe an answer to that system? Like, what would be a better political system to bring in? Like just a majority vote, like you just get rid of the Electoral College, and that maybe fixes some of the issue?
Ah, man, our problems are so big right now. Without dealing with the central bank, none of this will ever go away. Right now, there's not a president that's ever been seated that isn't directly related to the British royal crown. It goes on and on. And that's not even the half of it. Like, I was watching this thing on the lead guitarist of ZZ Top, Billy Gibbons, the other day. He's like I don't even know, the 100th rock star that I used to think was cool when I was a kid, which I no longer think is cool, by the way, whose mother had directly to do with the White House. Look at Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison's father was the admiral who lied and started the Vietnam War. I can go on and on and on here. All of Hollywood, entertainment, music, it's all complicit. All of it is complicit, owned and operated. And it's to push an agenda. And that agenda is a long game. That long game came out into the light of day on 9/11. That's when the black-eyed beast that exists in our world poked its head out into the light of day and said, guess what, folks? We have so much control now, we're not going to hide anymore. We're going to do it in your damn face. And then, of course, after 9/11, what happens? For some reason, after 9/11, we wake up in this country, and every day someone wakes up and just needs to kill a few thousand people with an assault rifle. It's in your face, and it's all a lie. And until people start to grow up and get into their adult minds and quit joining groups and believing what they're told, I don't even know how we start to get out from under this. One thing would be to go back to common law. Common law was the founding legal system for the United States and Canada, and it makes so much sense. No loss, no injury, no harm. There's no reason to ever see the inside of a court. It's that simple.
Oh, I would be all for that. That sounds great.
And it would make it very difficult for a lot of the things to go on that are going on now. I would venture to guess that however many people hear this podcast, less than 1% of them will understand that when they show up in a courtroom, what's being exercised in there is commercial law. It's a corporation doing business. And you are chattel.
See, what's crazy to me here with all that is that, like, this is knowledge that you've obtained. Like, you were talking about the Jim Morrison thing and how his father was the admiral of Vietnam and everything like this. Like, so this is, I don't want to say public knowledge, but it is obtainable knowledge that we can all gather. These are things that we can learn as individuals and humans and whatnot. Then, in your opinion, it's hilarious because we've got this notebook here and I got a lot of stuff written down. Paul's written stuff down. Like, we got all these questions because we're happy to have you on, and it's real interesting to kind of like probe your brain about this stuff. But at the same time, I'm just branching off of what you said. I'm curious, why do you think then, if this is publicly available knowledge that we could all learn if we wanted to go out and seek it, why are so many people devoid of that knowledge or don't want to accept that knowledge? Why do we do the day-to-day? Why do we do the sheep thing?
Social programming. Some of it is like Stockholm syndrome. We've been in the cage so long, we love the cage. That's part of it, but the social engineering is part of it. And another big piece of it is, Rome, the supposed time of ancient Rome. How did they tell us they needed to rule? With bread and circus, right? Yeah. Well, what do you think the Super Bowl is? What do you think television is? What do you think movies and Marvel? And that's the circus. And so what happens is people get up in the morning, their ass is kicked because they just got up the last 5 mornings, and they got to go to a job most people don't like in a damn cubicle under fluorescent lights. And by the time they get home at the end of the day, their butt is kicked. Then they got to deal with the children. Then they got to deal with all the legal nonsense that's been piled on us. Oh, I got to renew my car license. I got to get insurance. I got to pay taxes. I got to do all these nonsensical things because the system doesn't view me as an adult. And so by the time I get done with all that, I just want to crack a beer and watch the damn Super Bowl. Can I do that? Am I allowed to do that? But I got news for you. By the time you've watched the Super Bowl, your time's gone. You don't have time for anything else because tomorrow morning you got to wake up and go do it all again. This is the long game of social engineering. This is no different than the times you heard about where kings and queens ruled serfdoms, right? How did a king and a queen back in the day rule? What are we talking about? 20, 30, 40 people in the royal family controlling everybody? How were they doing it? Well, they're doing it in the same way and maybe a little more in your face than now. They've gotten better at it. And so that's a big part of why people are afraid to look. But maybe the biggest part is social engineering, because they're taught that it's conspiracy. If they can grow up enough to realize that, hell yeah, there's a conspiracy, but it's not the people pointing out. It's the conspirators doing it that are being pointed at. They get hopeless. They think, what can I do about it? And I'm here to tell you, I'm one man, and I can do a hell of a lot before I drop dead, and I'll spend all that time doing a hell of a lot until I do, hoping that other people will catch on. And to finish that thought, sometime around the year 2000, a hell of a lot of minds started waking up and coming online. And that's a big part of the online censorship that we're seeing, is trying to prevent those awake minds from ever understanding how many there are. When I look out into the field for other points of light like myself, all I can do is guess. Are there 1,000 out there? Are there 100,000? Are there 100 million? How many damn points of lights are out there? And now you see the complicit nature of the wholesale control of information online. I don't know how many are out there. I suspect it's a ton of people, but that's what's being pushed against and fought against, is all those awakening minds, because that will create the biggest problem for these people that's ever been.
I'm going to ask you a real quick question, just kind of going back on that a little bit. And I know this is kind of a cynical viewpoint, but is it a possibility that because of the way that the human or mankind hierarchy is structured, that this kind of corruption, even if you were to be able to fix it this day and age over a long enough period of time, a new form of it would just kind of come about? So, like, it almost in a sense, is this kind of corruption, just because of the way that human beings are structured to interact with each other, is kind of an inevitable
will it exist
kind
forever?
Of thing? Yeah.
You make a valid point, and you show yourself to be a thinking individual. I don't know how to answer that. We have to reach for the best we can be, and it would
Absolutely.
be a sad day indeed if, while we reached, we found out that this is the best we can ever be. I choose not to accept it. I choose to accept that all this false violence that's put in front of us all the time is trying to convince human beings that they are something they are not. When I go out in my lifetime, have I ever bumped into a person that just wanted to grab an assault rifle and kill a bunch of kids or something? If I did, I'm not aware of it. And if I did, it was such a minuscule portion of my life as to be statistically insignificant. But your question is a valid one. Maybe we could quote old Billy Joel. What's his song? We didn't start the fire. We tried to fight it. But it's been burning since the world's been turning. Well, there's a problem with that because the world is not turning. So even Billy Joel is still lying to us all. But my point is, even the popular culture is claiming that whatever the hell it is we're witnessing, it's been going on for a long time. But I choose to believe that a human being has a near divine inheritance, birthright. And what's happened here is people invented this thing called money. They got more than their fair share, and that began allowing the whole chessboard to be taken over. I'm not sure what would happen if everything was zeroed out to level again, but I'll sure as hell fight for it as long as I can.
Definitely. Do you think that maybe back in the day, as opposed to currency, maybe the Bible was the currency back then, and that's how they had controlled people back in that time of era?
Certainly, the Bible was used for that. No one will ever convince me that there's been a day in the life of the Vatican where helping people spiritually grow up, it was the goal. It's not the goal. The Vatican has canon law on record to this day that they wrote, like it was covered in the book Shogun by James Clavell. What's that, the 1400s? I don't know for sure what the year is. It's back a ways, where this pilot has crashed and all these papal Westerners are in Japan. And the pilot's trying to tell the shogun of Japan, there's this guy called the Pope that owns you. And the shogun's going, what the hell are you on about? What are you talking about? I never even heard of the Pope. And he says, I'm not kidding. The Pope puts these laws out called canons. And he put out a law that says the Vatican owns everything in the world, including the things not yet discovered. And that papal bull being referenced is still in force today. So yeah, that is a big part of religion. What it's been used to do in our world. It's in some ways, and people get mad when they hear it, but it's no different than Democrats and Republicans. It segments people down into a belief system that allows them to be controlled. And I would ask, why does any adult human being need a priest or anyone else to intercess between him and the supposed creator?
Like if you need a preacher or a religion to tell you, hey, it's not okay to rape, and that's what prevents you to rape, that's not a good thing. You should already know that that's not a good thing.
Well, you do. There's older forms of law that were written in Latin that prove it. There's a thing called mala in se in one of the legal systems that's come and gone that says bad by its nature, bad on the face of it. You don't even have to tell a child that killing someone is wrong because they're born knowing. And this is case in point for Sandy Hook, for terrorism, which is made up out of thin air, for ISIS, which is about a joke. All these things are trying to convince you that you can't trust your fellow man or woman. It's trying to convince you that there's this group of people on the other side of the world. They're not even really quite people, man. They're like animals. They just want to murder something. And how many people accept that? They're so damn naive with drool coming out of the corner of their mouth from sitting in front of that damn black box we call TV that they accept that. And they can't possibly reason out that in that part of the world, there are men and women having children who want the best for their children, just like everyone in this part of the world. And that all this nonsense that's being attached to it is social programming and a bid to take over the world. That's why it's here. It's why it exists. And when people truly grow up, they begin to realize that human beings by nature do not want to kill each other all the time. And the proof of that is because if that was true, how the hell could we have been here so long?
I think that's just general indoctrination in general, what you're talking about. Like, I mean, it's the same on a smaller scale. It's what they do with, military personnel during boot camp and stuff like that.
I was a Marine.
You try
That's
to get
exactly
them
what they do.
together to form this cohesive family unit and to be like, this is the enemy, this is the enemy, these are not people, shoot them, this is the enemy kind of thing. And now we're being fed that, though, as civilians on a large scale through what you said, the black box of TV and everything like that.
Anyone, I meet so many people who went through the military in the 70s and 80s who are awake to all this because they can now easily equate what was done to them in boot camp to what they see going on to the general society. It's programming, it's indoctrination. It's in boot camp. For me, I was a Marine. They literally take away your identity and beat you down all the way down. beat you down to the basement, man. Then they dig a little hole in the basement, they beat you down a little more. Then they start building you back up, turning you back into a human being, but you're not really being turned into a human being. You're being turned into a killing machine called the United States Marine.
They're turning you into what they want to turn you into now.
That's
they're
right.
rebuilding you as their own.
That's right, because taking life has a cost. So if it's unfortunate that some Marine was convinced that because they were told to do so, they should go out and take a life, there's a price to pay for that. And you won't see the people who start the wars ever taking a life, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. You don't just get away scot-free. We're looking at this worldwide control takeover. They have all the military power, all the technology. Why don't they just put on their steel-toed boots and come out with weapons and say, do what we say now or we'll kill you? And the reason for that is because whenever that happens, there's a price to pay for every life taken. And not only that, it can get out of control quick. And the last thing they ever want to happen in this world is loss of control. That's what allows them to do what they're doing, which is why corporations are doing it. They get richer and richer. Money doesn't even matter anymore. It's made up out of thin air. They have more than they could spend in 1,000 lifetimes. What matters is control. And the corporations have bought every information system, all of Hollywood, what people call the news because they don't know any better. Those are all propaganda centers now. And they're owned and operated by a precious few group of people who are in two overarching organizations, which will soon be one corporation, and each of the board members, all the way from the big 5 corporations down to the big 2, sat on overarching things called the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, and things like this. So there was really never a time in recent memory when the small group of the same people weren't exerting control just over a few more corporations. But shortly it'll just be one.
When did, as far back as you can tell, when did it start? I mean, do you entertain the idea of like the Anunnaki, any of that stuff? Does it go back that far?
I don't accept aliens because it's, that's another thing Tavistock put its stamp on, saying that they created the modern alien agenda along with the Age of Aquarius agenda. That was Tavistock programming. I've never seen, you'll never meet a guy probably that's filmed more weird things with a telescope than I have. But I'll sit here and tell you all of it is within our atmosphere and all of it is created by human beings. So whether or not I'm answering you correctly depends on what the Anunnaki means. Are we talking about extraterrestrials here? If so, I don't accept it. There's no evidence for me to accept it other than hearsay. If the Anunnaki are some other kind of biblical reference or something like this, then I'm here to tell you that almost all the major religions of our world are allegories for things that go on in our world, among other things. They also all track the path of the sun, by the way.
Yeah, they're all real similar in the first place, too. They have, every one of them has a prophet or a disciple or a messiah and everything that all link together. And like you said, they track the sun, and they're all based on
pagan astrological,
astrological things and constellations, and
all based on the sky clock, because the sky clock to this day is tracked by the most important organizations in this world. Everything they do is timed to the sky clock. After all, when did censorship hit online out in the open? In the fall of 2017. Well, of course in the fall, because from the time the sun passes the high point in the summer in June, called the summer solstice, it begins to fall. And as it falls, the days get shorter and shorter and shorter, and the nights get longer and longer and longer, all the way down to what we call Christmas, which is actually the winter solstice. But a funny thing happens that no one probably ever told you. From the point the sun crosses that high point, human consciousness falls. Spiritual intent of human being falls all the way down to what we call Christmas. So now you know why the censorship comes to you in the fall. And by the way, on television, when does new programming? When is the new program that you are to be programmed with comes in the fall, right? There it is.
And this, I'm just going to reference a little farther back than what we were talking about as far as these individuals that are doing this programming and, these elite people that control the money and everything. This something that always made me wonder, like they have to realize that it's almost like an addiction and they're headed towards something that they will never be satisfied with if that's the case. And I never understood, how can they not realize if they're in control for, trying to get all this power, all the money, control people as much as humanly possible, let's say they achieve it. Well, what do they do after that kind of thing? Like, it's this endless dark hole that they're going down. I just don't understand how any individual could realize what they're even doing. There's no satisfaction there.
Right. So to take out what you just said to its logical, its logical conclusion, we could ask simple questions like, so suppose these jokers get it all, they reduce the population and they're in control. Would you want to live in that world where you just saw what this small group of people did to everybody? How would anyone in that group ever be safe? Right? Because you see what they do. But let's take it even to a more basic root, foundational, logical conclusion. There is nothing in this world that is created that will not be uncreated. It's a fact.
Change is inevitable.
Not only change, but the older roots of alchemy, which was natural science, the predecessor of the scientism we live under now, proves flat out that there's nothing in this world that's not an illusion. If I look up and I see a cloud, and then I look down and I see a rock, I'm looking at the same thing. While the cloud will become something else much more quickly, the rock will too. And so it has no permanence. And a thing without permanence cannot be considered to truly exist. Everything here is an illusion. And that is part of what's being leveraged off by these groups. But even if they did get their way, they have a shelf life, just like everything else here. But the real point for me would be, who would want to live with a group of people that shows how vicious and selfish they are? Even their own brothers and sisters, are they safe? When they see an opening to take over whatever it is they've got, will they do it? History would suggest, yes, they will.
So that's kind of like the great equalizer then for everything, that even though they're making this great attempt to change and control things, that it will, that everything's an illusion in the end and that everything will end, at some point. Is that kind of your thought?
Well, there's also this notion of transhumanism, right? Where they can do away with death and put their consciousness into technology somehow, which I don't accept, by the way, but that is part of the aim. The end game of the technocracy is transhumanism. Most of the transhumanism is going to be aimed at us to control us. It's the old biblical idea of you want to buy or sell, you get a chip so we can track you everywhere, which is already going on, whether they chip you or not. So it doesn't really matter. But the point here is there's this pipe dream that technology and science can get them to a point where they don't have to die anymore. And so that too is just nonsense.
It's unnatural. That's very unnatural. I think it's part of the human experience, actually, is death. And obviously something that's scary, but also shouldn't be feared. I think that's just a part of, the whole scheme of things.
Everything I've ever studied in my life lets me know that this place is a bit like school. Maybe it's a bit like boot camp because it's very difficult for a lot of people here. But it's a cycle of hardship and necessity. You're not getting out of this. You can take your own life, but really, have you removed yourself from this? Are you going to come do it again? Who the hell knows? Basically, you're not getting out of this until you go through this level of education. And then it's a doorway to whatever's next. So what we see is the extreme selfishness, self-centeredness of people who want to own the best cars, want to control all the governments, want to control all the people so that they can have what they want. The logical nature of what they're doing is insanity. It's sociopath. It's any number of things we could call it. And by the way, even if they got what they were after, they reduced the population to 500,000 people or 500 million people, whatever they're claiming, and they got control of everything. And then lo and behold, some joker out there downloaded his consciousness into some organic computer. So what? He can do that for 1,000 years. Maybe he can do everything that is created will see its end in this system. There is nothing here that is permanent. Not a damn thing.
So, once again, man, we're getting to the top of the hour at 55 minutes. I think we have one good last question for you. What's the craziest theory that you've heard of or that you believe in?
Well, let me rephrase that for you. One of the taglines I often use is belief is the enemy of knowing. I've trained myself for many years to not believe in things, but I am human, so I do make mistakes. So if we're to look at what you just asked me, it would be a topic that came up that I researched and then found reason to temporarily accept or accept until something else comes along. That would be that we live in a closed system, and I tested the hell out of this. Nothing leaves our atmosphere. Nothing has ever left our atmosphere. The sun and the moon are roughly 2,000 to 4,000 miles away, probably. And to top it off, there's a good chance, if the data we were given on the last eclipse is true, the size of the shadow that was put on the Earth, those objects are roughly 70 to 80 miles across. So we live basically, well, it's not far from what Bibles and other religions have said, basically a snow globe, right? And I will end that statement, which may be shocking for some, to go look at Wernher von Braun's headstone. Wernher von Braun was responsible for all the rocketry that supposedly drove the Apollo missions. To this day, we cannot go back to the moon because we lost the technology that Wernher von Braun made. Not kidding you. 50 years later, we can't do what they did.
That makes no sense.
No, but if you go to his headstone, he left us a coded key. It says his name and date of life, but it says Psalm, I forget whether it's 191. It's 911 encoded like everything else, like the 1611 King James Bible. It all encodes 911. But if you go to that passage, it will inform you that what I just said was true. The firmament shows the handiwork of God. So here's a man who supposedly put rockets into outer space, and yet he left a 911 encoded biblical scripture on his headstone that informs us the firmament is God's handiwork.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, so Crow, I want to thank you for joining the podcast, man. I would love to have you on again. I know you're probably a busy man and you got a lot going on. I know you said in the last podcast you're going to do a podcast with, as many people as you can possible. So just you have my email, man. Let me know if you ever want to join the show again, and that'd be awesome.
Why don't you guys just ping me when you can? Here's the deal. We've been doing the run-up for Shoot the Moon, the film Jason's making. It's going to be released on April 5th, so we're getting close. It's been a hell of a lot of work to do 2 shows a week, which we do, a live show and then Crrow777 radio on Thursdays. We're starting to get close to the release date. I'm happy to come back on. Anyone who's polite and knowledgeable, I'm happy to do their shows. I just did a Holy Christian podcast a few days ago, and it was great. I got to talk to a new audience that may not have heard me before. So what I'm telling you is, if you'd like me back, ping me. We've done this. I know you. No issues here.
Cool. Can you tell me what the definition of a there is, by the way?
A lot of people believe in things where there is no there. They've just imagined that there is a there. And what that means is you're accepting something to exist that doesn't. Is there a reason? Is there anything? Is there evidence? Is there something here that allows us to continue or accept? And so much of our world is based on belief, where people just decided to believe a thing. And that's a big problem. And it's not a shot at religion, by the way, when I say belief is the enemy of knowing. People have the right to any religious ideas they like. My point here is that when you choose to believe in a thing, you've done zero investigation. You just decided to believe in it. And what's worse is, once you believe in a thing, for a lot of people, it's very difficult to unbelieve. For a lot of people, they will never unbelieve what they have decided to believe. So that's the basis of the idea of a there.
That's
Do
true
your
wisdom
investigation.
Right there.
Prove that there's a reason to stand in this spot.
A lot of the information that you get, do you do a lot of online research, or do you get like a lot of older books that you find? I know you've talked about that before, but when it comes to finding research, I don't know like really where to go. Obviously, Google's not probably the best place for that. I mean, ideas on that?
Online, every month that's gone by since we've run this podcast, it's been harder to use online resources to get to data that matters. I typically use a crap load of old books, and I collect old books all the time, or books that were printed in the modern era. I consider anything written before like World War II to be what I call before the modern edit. You can actually detect the tone and tenor of things written before the modern age of scientism that wants you to believe in black holes and other nonsense, and wants you to believe in space in the way it's been described. For my part, almost all the research I do is offline, though a little of it does. Jason my co-host, tries to do the majority of his using the internet, but what he has found is don't use Google, don't use the big main places, and if you find a place that works, keep your mouth shut, because if it gets popular, it'll go away.
Yeah. So for anyone who listens to this, can you tell them how to reach your website? I forget the actual domain name, sorry.
Right. So on YouTube, I'm Crrow777, which is CRR2RSOW777. My private site, which maintains and protects free speech away from Google, is Crrow777radio.com. And again, the word crow has 2 R's, but even if you typo it, I think you get there. So it's basically Crrow777radio.com.
Very cool, man.
Awesome. That was very enlightening. I wasn't ready for some of the things you said, man.
Good, and let's wrap up by saying this. I've said a lot of things just now in this podcast, and any person who took the time to listen has one responsibility: challenge every damn one of them. Try to rip it apart, try to poke a hole in it, try to prove me wrong.
Absolutely.
That's your responsibility as an adult if you just want to quit believing in things because you feel like it. So challenge everything that I've laid down here. Nothing I've said should go unchallenged.
Rock on. Well, thank you, Crow, and cheers, man.
Cheers. Thank you guys so much for having me, and I'm happy to come back.
Have a good one, Crow.
Cheers, guys.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Crow joining the podcast. That was pretty sweet. So.
That was intense in a way.
That was very
talked about some
intense.
stuff I haven't heard of before. Very logical kind of. And I'd just like to point out big props to him at the end there for saying, "Hey, challenge everything."
Yeah.
I love when people are because that's what I've said before. You should. There's nothing wrong with believing in something. Believing, air quotes here, believing in something, but you should always be willing to play devil's advocate, and you should always be willing to learn something about the opposite side of that, or else what's the point? If you can't challenge your own thoughts and beliefs, then they're not valid in the first place.
Absolutely.
Well, there you have it, guys. That was Crrow777. He said he'll come on again, so that'll be dope. That'll be pretty sweet. So thanks for listening. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell notification whenever we come out with new videos every Sunday or Monday.
And stay fly and ring the bell.
Happy 1 year.
Yes, sir. That's right. Thank you.